Here's the current ranking of all of the middle evolutions in Pokemon Yellow. There are 4 species not included in this list. Nidorino, Nidorina, who are coming in a video very soon. It's gonna be a big one. I've been procrastinating a little bit on getting the final runs done, since there will be 6 Pokemon in that video. Today we're gonna do something a little bit smaller and complete 2 other middle evolutions. Today I'm gonna play Graveler and Machoke. Looking through the results of all the other middle evolutions, I'm expecting Graveler and Machoke to come in somewhere in the middle of the middle evolutions. They're good Pokemon, but they're not exceptional like Poliwhirl, and they're definitely not as bad as Pokemon like Kadabra, Dragonair, Gloom, and Pidgeotto. At least that's my prediction before we get into these runs. These are the rules for the solo challenge, and we're going to start today with Machoke. For base stats, it has 80 HP, 100 attack, 70 defense, 45 speed, and 60 special. In Generation 1, it's got an 8.59% chance to crit, and for starting moves, it has Karate Chop, Low Kick, and Leer. It's actually a really nice set for the early game since we have super effective damage against Brock. Now, one downside is Karate Chop. This move has a high critical hit rate in Generation 1, but in order to be guaranteed critical hits with it, your base speed needs to be at least 64. With 45 base speed, Machoke will crit 70% of the time that it uses Karate Chop. It's definitely an advantage against Bug-type Pokemon in Viridian Forest. That said, I'm only going to fight a single one of them because I'm going right for the mandatory Bug Catcher at the end of the forest on minimum battles. I can use Karate Chop to knock out the 1 level 10 Caterpie here and level Machoke up to 8. Then I go straight for Brock because with Low Kick, I'm pretty sure Machoke's going to be able to pull this off right away. But before we get into the battle with Brock, I want to talk about the sponsor of this video, Raycon. The latest version of their Everyday Earbuds Classic now features active noise cancellation, which was the one thing that they were missing before. They also have 8 hours of playback time, and the audio quality rivals all of the big brands that you know and love. It's just at half of the price. And for me, that's really important these days when everything seems like it just constantly gets more expensive. Additionally, they have 3 different sound modes so that you can listen however you want, reliable earbud button functions, awareness mode, and optimized gel tips for a custom, comfortable fit. Also, they have some really cool colors. This is specifically my favorite color. I am so glad that they sell earbuds like this. They've also got some really neat case designs, as well as some awesome cables, which I have talked about before because they've sponsored the channel and supported me multiple times. Go to buyraycon.com/ScottsThoughts to get 20% off the fan favorite Everyday Earbuds Classic. Thanks to Raycon for sponsoring this video. Now let's get into Brock. Geodude is first. Low Kick does more than half, inflicts a flinch so Brock isn't able to attack, and I knock out his lead. Leveling up to 9, moving on to the Onix. Now, I wanted to play safe here because Machoke is slower than Onix, so Brock can go for Bide, and I can attack into it with Low Kick, and I think with the amount of damage Low Kick is doing, Onix will knock out Machoke in a single hit. So I wanted to establish Leer, lower the Onix's defense to the point that I would 2-shot it using Low Kick, so that Bide could not knock me out. And while I do this, setting up Leers, the Onix hits a ridiculous number of binds, slowly chipping away at my health. It's also going for Tackle, and by the time I start using Low Kick, I'm on orange health. Onix goes for Bind again and knocks Machoke out. Alright, this is about as unlucky as I could possibly get here. I decided to keep the experience from Geodude and Blackout, fighting Brock again at a higher level. This time the Onix just uses Tackle and Screech, not using Bind over and over again. Because of that, I have tons of health left over by the time I'm attacking with Low Kick, and I easily knock out the Onix in only 2 hits. Machoke gets a 3-minute and 39-second Brock split, which is pretty good for the early game, and I think I got really unlucky this time around. I will definitely be able to get a much faster split with my follow-up attempt. So what about Graveler? For base stats, it has 55 HP, 95 attack, 115 defense, 35 speed, and 45 special. Its crit rate is 6.64%, and for starting moves, this is where things get unfortunate. It only has Tackle and Defense Curl, which doesn't give it a move to beat Brock with quickly. Now, both of these Pokemon do have the medium slow growth rate. I'm not sure why the trade evolutions got this growth rate since it is amazing for Pokemon, and it seems like the trade evolutions are all extremely strong Pokemon Pokemon they were trying to keep away from the player unless you were able to trade with your friend. So Graveler will be able to level up quickly in the early game, but the next move it learns is at level 16, and that's Rock Throw, which doesn't really help that much against Brock, especially because in Generation 1, Rock Throw has 65% accuracy. As a Rock type, Graveler resists all of Brock's attacks, and I know that's what's going to give it the ability to win before it learns Rock Throw at level 16. I'm going to target level 13 as my first attempt against Brock, and if that doesn't work, I'll try the next damage rounding threshold at level 15. In order to train, I fight all the wild Pokemon that appear in the early game, as well as all of the bug catchers inside of Viridian Forest. Upon arriving in Pewter City, I fight the junior trainer inside of Brock's gym, defeating his 2 Pokemon, and this brought Graveler nearly to level 14. So now it's going to level up after I defeat Brock's Geodude to 14 and get slightly more health and damage for the Onix. And that might be key, because I need to do at least 2 damage per hit using Tackle to both of his Pokemon, otherwise I'm going to run out of PP before I beat both of his team members. Against the Geodude, I'm doing more than 2 damage per hit. It looks like 3 damage per hit. It's only able to do 1 damage per hit whenever it's using Tackle, so I don't need to set up any turns of Defense Curl. And since I don't yet have the Boulder badge, even if I did set up Defense Curl, I wouldn't be triggering the badge boost glitch to increase my attack stat. Upon knocking out the Geodude, my Graveler has taken 9 hit points in damage, and then Onix comes in. Now, Graveler is slower than Onix, so if the Onix goes for Bind over and over again, it's going to waste a lot of time, and it also has the potential to knock out Graveler without taking any damage, at least theoretically, but that won't be the case. Another complicating factor here with the underspeed is that I will attack into Bide every time Onix goes for it. Luckily, I can switch into using Defense Curl so that it doesn't accumulate too much additional damage, but it is still going to pay some back to Graveler. The problem is, at level 14, it looks like I'm only doing 1 damage per hit to the Onix. It has 32 HP, and because of that, unless I get really lucky with critical hits, I'm either going to need to win with Struggle, which won't be possible because I didn't spam out Defense Curl's PP, or I'm just going to lose. In the end, I decided to attack into Bide and lose as fast as possible, taking the Blackout here so that I could go back and train to level 15 over the next damage rounding threshold. I'm really hoping that that's going to give me 2 damage per turn against the Onix, and it does. Still, this doesn't make things incredibly easy for Graveler. It's taking chip damage all the time from Onix. It's still underspeeding, so Bide is occasionally hitting for some damage, and while I am able to knock out the Onix, it's a close fight. Graveler survives with only 7 hit points remaining, and earns itself an 8-minute and 17-second Brock split. In the first 2 splits of the run, Machoke is in a lead. It was able to beat Rival 1 faster because it had low kick for his Eevee, and then against Brock, it is now in a 4-minute and 37-second lead. And unfortunately for Graveler, I don't think it's going to be able to win back any time in the next split, since Misty is coming up next. With rock ground types, it initially seems like fighting every trainer from here until Misty, and then going to Vermilion City fighting all the trainers on the SSN first would be the best choice. Experience has taught me that I can still target the trainers that have good experience yields and skip all the trainers that are quite inefficient. Graveler is also extremely slow, and it is not going to be able to move first against Misty's Starmie. So the solution for it is going to have to be surviving a water gun instead of it attacking with Bubble Beam, and then one-shotting Misty's ace. In order to make this possible, I need to not take a hit from the Staryu, which means Graveler is going to need 39 speed in order to move first. So in this section of the game, that's what I'm going to target. I still fight a ridiculous number of trainers in Mount Moon, soaking up a bunch of experience here before moving on to the next section of the game. Remember, after you jump into Cerulean City, you cannot backtrack to the cave later on to get that experience if you've already skipped it. By the time I arrive in Cerulean City, my Graveler is level 21. It's learned Rock Throw by this point, and all of the trainers on Nugget Bridge should be pretty easy to manage. The rival could be annoying because I have to 3-shot his Sandshrew, giving it opportunities to use Sand Attack, but in this case it doesn't use the annoying move. The only way for things to go bad here for Graveler would be having its accuracy dropped, because his Pokemon only have normal type moves in Yellow version, and as a rock type, I'm just not scared of them. Okay, heading out onto Nugget Bridge, let's talk about Graveler's move pool. Through level up, it learns 3 useful moves: Defense Curl, Harden, and Earthquake. Because of my rules for solo challenges, Self-Destruct and Explosion are not useful moves within this format. I know that some people believe that I should allow myself to use these moves to knock out the trainer's final Pokemon and then win the fight with my HM users, but for me, that always feels like it's against the spirit of these challenges. I'm essentially playing the game in a way that it's like I don't have any HM users, they're just there to help me navigate the overworld. And when I'm winning fights, which I should otherwise lose lose if I only had Graveler as a part of my team, that just doesn't feel like I've really accomplished what I set out to do. So today, no self-destruct or explosion. Now I do have self-destruct on my current moveset because I can't teach Graveler anything else, and that's a little bit concerning. If I accidentally click on it, I will have to take a reset or a blackout. That would be frustrating, so I'm going to get rid of it as soon as I can. Now the useful moves that I mentioned are Defense Curl and Harden. These two function exactly the same way, so it doesn't matter which one I end up using. Defense Curl prints a little bit more text than Harden, so I think that using Harden long term is going to be the better choice. It'll save a few frames here and there. These moves provide utility to Graveler because they're going to allow me to trigger the badge boost. Right now I have Brock's badge, so I can increase my attack stat every time I use Defense Curl. This is a compounding boost of 12.5%, and it resets every time my Pokemon levels up during battle. So I'll have to be careful, especially in the late game when I'm leveling up. And the badge boost that I'm most excited to get with Graveler is the speed boost, which comes from Koga's badge, even though the game's text tells you that you get a speed boost from Surge's badge. But that wouldn't matter anyways, because you can't cut the tree outside of his gym to get inside unless you've beaten Misty already. So unfortunately with Graveler, I do have to fight her next. But that's where all the TMs and HMs come in, because Graveler can learn some really good moves. It doesn't get a lot of coverage, but it gets everything that it needs. Earthquake, Fissure, and Dig specifically, which is a 100 base power move in Generation 1, and I'm gonna get that right after Bill's house. Graveler can also learn Rock Slide, and Rock and Ground type moves together provide neutral coverage against every target in the game. Just in case you want to mix in some other moves, Graveler can also learn Mega Punch, Body Slam, Submission, Counter, and Seismic Toss, as well as Fire Blast. That one doesn't really make a lot of sense when Graveler has terrible special. I guess you might want to use it. I'm sure as a kid I probably would have put Fire Blast on Graveler's set. It seems like an amazing move. Using Fire Blast against a grass type with Graveler would feel like using Ice Punch with Hitmonchan. After grabbing the Dig TM, I immediately teach it to Graveler in the place of self-destruct, so I can't accidentally click on this move. Now, I could technically fight Misty now, but that doesn't make sense since my speed stat is only 34. Instead, I'm going to go south to Vermilion City, defeat all the mandatory trainers here, and soak in a little bit more experience. Also, on the SS hand, I get to test out my damage ranges against a Staryu. This one is the exact same level as Misty's Staryu, and it has the same stats, because all trainer Pokemon in Generation 1 have the exact same DVs, 9 attack and 8 in everything else. Look at how much damage this Staryu's Water Gun does to Graveler. It's ridiculous. That almost one-shot, and it proves to me that I really do need to outspeed Misty's Staryu to have a chance against the Starmie. I pick up the TM for Rest. Maybe this will be useful later. I'm just playing as safely as possible during the first playthrough. Then I grab Body Slam, teach this to Graveler in the place of Tackle, fight the Gentleman to get access to a rare candy, and then Graveler absolutely crushes the rival, because he still doesn't have access to any special moves. During this fight, I should probably mention the fact that Yellow version is easier for Graveler than Red and Blue. This is because the rival during these fights, if you're playing against the most difficult team, would have either Bulbasaur, Squirtle, Ivysaur, or Wartortle, which obviously would know special moves and probably would one-shot Graveler after the little test we did against the Sailor's Staryu. I think outspeeding and one-shotting everything with Dig is basically the only way for Graveler to get through this section of the game. And speaking of outspeeding, at level 28 after the rival, I have exactly 38 speed, which is not an outspeed. That is a tie with Misty's Staryu. So I'm going to continue fighting optional trainers on the SSN to level up to 29, where I teach Graveler Harden in the place of Defense Curl to save some frames on text, and then with 39 speed, I head back to Misty's gym to face the Water type specialist. This strategy has one potential hiccup. Misty has an X-Defend, and in Generation 1, the AI trainers can use their items on both of their Pokemon. So there's the potential for her to use the X-Defend when I'm underground using Dig on the Staryu, and then maybe survive. Although in the first fight, she just goes for Water Gun, and I one-shot. Next is Starmie. Here is where she needs to roll Water Gun. She's got good AI, so she's either picking Water Gun or Bubble Beam. In this case, she goes for Bubble Beam, and it easily one-shots Graveler. In the next fight, I tried using Body Slam against the Staryu, which will save time, and it doesn't risk the X-Defend. And it's able to one-shot her lead, so there's never any risk here. The only risk is the Starmie, but it goes for Bubble Beam, not once, but 2 more times in a row, and both of them one-shot. So here's a question to test out your intuitive read of this situation. Do you think there is a chance for Graveler to survive the hit from Misty's Starmie when it uses Bubble Beam? I'm going to give you a moment to come up with your answer before I give you the exact numbers. Okay, you've got it? So Bubble Beam does between 81 and 96% damage with a regular hit. That is 96 to 114% damage. So it one-shots the Graveler 86% of the time when factoring in critical hit chance. That means Graveler has a 14% chance to survive whenever the Starmie goes for Bubble Beam. But that's obviously not the easiest way to win here. In my 4th fight against her, she goes for Water Gun. Graveler easily survives that hit, uses Dig. Then I need her not to go for X-Defend on the next turn. She chooses Water Gun again while Graveler's underground. Dig hits her ace, and it does enough damage to one-shot. By the way, the damage range from Dig is 107% damage to 127% damage. So at a lower level, Graveler wouldn't be able to get the one hit against the Starmie on every single turn. That said, I think the speed threshold is required for the Staryu unless you're going to gamble here with the enemy getting a Generation 1 miss, and I just don't think that that's a good strategy. But this does mean if Misty goes for the X-Defend on Starmie, the only way that Graveler is going to one-shot is with a critical hit. Okay, with Misty behind us, things get easier for Graveler, because of course Surge is next, and there's nothing that he can do to Graveler. His only Pokemon is Raichu. It has Thunderbolt, Mega Punch, Mega Kick, and Growl. I don't care about any of these moves. Graveler uses a single Dig, Surge's Pokemon faints, and Graveler gets its 3rd split of 23 minutes and 25 seconds. For Machoke, this section of the game is going to be much easier than it was for Graveler. On Route 3, I want to mention the fact that Machoke is just knocking everything out so much faster. Unlike Graveler, which had to rely on Tackle to slowly chip all of the enemy Pokemon down, Machoke has fairly reliable critical hits when using Karate Chop, and super effective damage against all of the normal types with Low Kick. Plus, I'm skipping a bunch of the trainers that I fought with Graveler for additional levels, because I don't think that Machoke needs it, since it doesn't have a type disadvantage to either Misty or Surge. And if we go through Machoke's learn set, you're gonna see that there shouldn't be problems in the next section of the game. Through Level Up, it doesn't really get anything useful: Low Kick, Leer, Focus Energy, Seismic Toss, and Submission. But through TM and HM, it gets good coverage. Mega Punch inside of Mount Moon, Body Slam on the SSN, Submission, Counter, Seismic Toss, just in case you want to actually use fighting type moves. But we're gonna stick with Low Kick, which I think is the best fighting type move in Generation 1, unless you're using Hitmonlee. This is where we get to Machoke's good coverage: Earthquake, Fissure, Dig, Fire Blast, and Rock Slide. This is the reason I chose to pair these two Pokemon up in a versus video, because their learn sets are very similar: fighting moves, ground moves, fire moves, and rock moves. And while Machoke is steamrolling its way through the early game, that's not going to be the case for the late game. Things get much more difficult for fighting types when psychic type moves become much more common. And even throughout the mid game, a lot more psychic moves start popping up, which is going to make the challenge much more difficult for Machoke. That said, the rival in Cerulean City is incredibly easy. The Spearow does have super effective damage with Peck, but this rival does not have good AI, so he has no idea that he should be using this move. Even when he lowers my attack with Growl, I don't really care, because when I get critical hits with Karate Chop, it bypasses this stat change, and then I have Low Kick for the two normal types that finish out the fight. The high density of mandatory trainers on Nugget Bridge is an advantage for Machoke, because it beats all of these people with its excellent early game moveset, speeding up its overall progress. Before I make it back to the Cerulean City gym, I fight the Rocket to get the Dig TM so that I can teach this to Machoke before I take on Misty. Machoke's speed is not in the perfect place for this battle. I'm speed tied with the Staryu. She does use an X-Defend on it, but then Machoke gets a critical hit and I one-shot anyway. Starmie outspeeds with Water Gun, which does fine damage. It's like roughly 1/4, but this just isn't enough. Also, Misty's AI doesn't know which moves it should be using against Machoke, so she's randomizing. Because of this, the Starmie can just go for Harden, wasting time, giving me more chances to attack for free. And it only takes Machoke 2 turns to knock out her ace with Dig. Okay, as we head towards the SSN, I want to talk about the difference between Karate Chop and Body Slam. In Generation 1, the critical hit multiplier is not exactly 2. It rises towards 2 as your Pokemon levels up more and more, and typically it's around about 1.8. Because of this, even if we were critical hitting every single turn with Karate Chop, its damage still would only be roughly roughly equivalent to Body Slam. But because of the fact that Machoke isn't critical hitting every turn with Karate Chop, and Body Slam has the upside of paralysis, it is the better normal type move to use with Machoke, so fighting one optional trainer in order to get the TM makes sense. That said, I'll keep Karate Chop on my set for now since I can replace Leer for Body Slam, and then I just have more PP. Although Machoke doesn't really need it, it isn't running any setup moves, and that's going to remain true throughout the remainder of the game, because unlike Graveler, which gets Defense Curl and Harden, Machoke does not have access to a move to trigger the badge boost glitch. This is another reason why I'm anticipating that it's going to struggle in the later stages of the game, but at least for now, things remain easy. The rival has normal moves and a bunch of normal type Pokemon. In the third battle against him, he does have good AI, so the Spearow is always going to be going for Peck, but I just one-shot with Body Slam, so it doesn't even have a chance. Okay, Surge. Technically, he could do more to Machoke because Thunderbolt will do damage. That said, Surge is pretty incompetent. He just goes for X speed on turn 1, which is useless since Raichu was already faster. Then Machoke hits with Dig and one-shots with a critical hit. Bye-bye Surge. That's the last time I'm talking about him in this video. With the third split complete, let's compare the results so far. Machoke's Surge split was 14 minutes and 52 seconds, so it is now 8 minutes and 33 seconds ahead of Graveler. It's only gained time since its Brock split, and throughout the early stages of the mid-game, it's not going to run into any other challenges. The Wrapping Lass is easy because Machoke can one-shot all of her Pokemon. The Pokemaniac inside of Rock Tunnel do have Confusion on their Slowpoke sets, but it's just never able to stack up enough damage because I'm able to knock them out quickly. The Self-Destructing Hiker, I have Low Kick or Dig to solve, and then I make it to Celadon City. This is where Machoke gets a major upgrade to its moveset. After completing the Rocket Hideout for one additional rare candy, I head to the department store and grab myself the Rock Slide TM. Teaching this in the place of Karate Chop now gives me super effective damage against any flying Pokemon, and like Graveler, I now have a Rock and Ground type move on my set, so I have neutral coverage against every single target from here on out. The rival in Pokemon Tower is incredibly easy for Machoke to manage. You might think the Fearow would be problematic, but its only flying type move is Mirror Move, and again, Rock Slide's super effective and I can just one-shot. All of the Chandlers inside of Pokemon Tower are incredibly easy because there are no abilities in Generation 1, so Dig one-shots these poison types. Jesse and James at the top of the tower are incredibly simple, and now I have a choice to make. Do I want to go south through Cycling Road to the Safari Zone? Say that 10 times fast. Or do I want to go to Saffron City and train in Silph Co? I decided on taking the Silph Co route because I think that Machoke is going to need some extended training in this section of the game. Fighting all the rockets here is going to provide me with a lot of experience. That said, the training here is a little bit problematic for Machoke. The Golbat has one more speed. Because of that, it moves first, hits me with Supersonic. Machoke is then confused, but luckily able to knock out the Golbat, moving on to the Rattata at the end of the fight. However, then everything falls apart. Machoke hits itself, and I take a loss here to the Rocket. I didn't save before him, so I'm gonna black out. That's my second one in this run. Instead of going back into Silph and fighting this Golbat again when our speeds are so close to each other, I'm gonna go to Cycling Road next and fight all of the trainers here that give good experience yields. The Grimy Biker, the Wheezing Biker, and the Biker Boss. Also, now that I've done some additional training, Machoke is level 37, so I can use Repels to dodge all of the wild encounters inside of the Safari Zone. After digging out of this location, I am teleported back to my last Pokemon Center that I healed at, which is Celadon City, and that's basically perfect because I might as well fight Erika now. Tangela's first. I don't really have good damage against this thing, instead I have to use Body Slam for a 3-shot. Luckily the Tangela just can't do much damage. Weepinbell's next, and I was expecting slightly better damage with Dig. I'm unable to get the one hit, so she uses Stun Spore, paralyzing Machoke. Now, if I repeatedly use Dig, I can trigger the invulnerability glitch here with paralysis, but after playing the game with Machop, I have learned that you really don't like it when I'm using this glitch, so I've sort of softly banned it in these solo challenges. If I would be using Dig otherwise to knock out Pokemon and the glitch does trigger, I'm not going to force myself to reset, I'll just continue playing the fight, but I'm not going to be intentionally trying to trigger this glitch in order to get easy wins. I'm hoping that sometime next year I can demonstrate to everyone just how broken the game is if you play through it with paralysis the entire time and constantly trigger the glitch. Even terrible Pokemon like Pidgey can get pretty respectable times when using this glitch. It's just that powerful. Without the glitch on my side, Erika ends up being kind of sketchy as you can see. The Gloom is thrashing around with Petal Dance, doing a lot of damage every turn, and Machoke is just not able to attack because of paralysis. Luckily, Gloom gets confused, it does not hit itself, then it goes for Acid. Machoke survives with 6 hit points, attacks with Body Slam, and knocks out Erika's ace. So that was incredibly close. I'm lucky that I was able to pull through there. With Erika behind it, Machoke is now entering the scary section of Pokemon Yellow. There are a lot of Psychic type users just around the corner. Before I fight them though, I head back to Silph and complete all of the training here that I skipped earlier. Doing this gets Machoke to level 44. Now I could have fought the rival here and then continued through Jesse and James to Giovanni for more experience, but with my speed stat, which is 73, I'm not faster than the rival's Kadabra, and that does make me scared. So I'm gonna dodge this Psychic type dig out of Silph and head to Koga's gym next, which is sort of solving the problem. There are other Psychic type users here which are weaker, but still this Kadabra, the random one inside of the gym, is faster than Machoke. Luckily it's just not very good, and I was able to one-hit all of the Drowsy on his team, so this Psychic type juggler is not that difficult. I complete the 2 tamers inside of the gym for extra experience, and this brings Machoke very close to level 46 prior to Koga. My speed stat here is not ideal. I'm slower than the Venomoth, but I am faster than all 3 of his Venonats. Now in Generation 1, Koga is essentially a bug type specialist who likes to use Psychic type moves. I'm expecting that this is going to be the first truly difficult battle for Machoke in this entire playthrough. Rock Slide is super effective against the bugs, and I'm hoping that it's going to one-shot all of the Venonats so I can avoid damage until the Venomoth. Unfortunately, I miss my second Rock Slide, so this Venonat is able to use Psybeam. Luckily, it went for the less powerful move. I finish it off with my follow-up Rock Slide, the third Venonat comes in, Machoke misses again. This one doesn't know Psybeam, so it goes for Psychic, inflicting a lot of damage. Okay, that was a critical hit. It's really disappointing when this happens. Anyway, I'm able to knock out the Venonat and make it to the Venomoth. There is the chance that I could win here with Koga using an X attack on his ace 2 turns in a row, or I get a critical hit in one shot. Maybe the Venomoth has a Gen 1 miss, but no, it just outspeeds, goes for Psychic, and finishes Machoke. With the fighting type, that's my first reset. The next fight is much smoother. I don't miss any Rock Slides on the Venonats, one-shotting all 3 of them, making it to the Venomoth with full health. Okay, this is the ideal scenario. Let's see how much damage Psychic does. It's more than half, and Rock Slide should not one-shot, so I don't think I'm going to be able to win this unless Machoke gets a critical hit, and it does. Because of that, Machoke has locked its way through Koga on only its second attempt. Let's go back to Graveler now and catch up in this section of the game. Overall, I would say this section of the game is a little bit easier for Graveler. It seems like it's going to have type disadvantages against all of the grass and water types throughout the Rock Tunnel Gauntlet, but that isn't really the case. It's just doing enough damage to knock out these Pokemon quickly, and all the grass types just don't get chances to attack it. Self-destructing Hiker is easy with Dig, and then in Celadon City, just like Machoke, it gets access to Rock Slide, greatly improving its current moveset. Inside of Pokemon Tower, let's compare some speed stats. Graveler has 49 speed, the first Ghastlies at lower levels have 45 speed, and the ones on the top floor have 47, so Graveler's moving first. This is a really easy section of the game. I decided to go to Cycling Road next and continue my training against Poison-type Pokemon. You might think that I should go to Silph to get the Earthquake TM so that I don't have to spend 2 turns using Dig all the time, but that doesn't actually matter. I can just level up to 36 and learn Earthquake naturally in the place of Body Slam. I'm keeping Dig on my set because I want to use it as a field move to get out of some locations, and with neutral coverage from rock and ground type moves, I don't actually need Body Slam against any targets. So Dig is just additional PP to use for super effective damage against Pokemon that I'm going to train against. Because like Machoke, once I make it to Silph, I continue my training here against all of the trainers that give good experience yields. By the time I've finished everyone here, my Graveler's level 42. I didn't want to fight the rival either, so I went to Koga's gym next. The Psychic types here aren't a problem. I fight both the Tamers for additional experience, and I'm level 44 by the time Graveler felt ready to face Koga. Unlike with Machoke, this fight isn't really that difficult, provided that with a rock ground type you can outspeed the first 3 Venonats. The reason that's important is because you don't want to get hit by Sleep Powder. Koga has good AI, so he's always prioritizing grass type moves when you don't have a status condition. That'll force the first and the third Venonat to always use the sleep inducing move, and then you can run into problems because he's probably going to attack after that with a move like Psychic, and that would do a lot of damage damage to Graveler. But with 64 speed, I move first against all of the Venonats, and I'm able to one-shot them obviously with Rock Slide. And since this move gets the same type attack bonus, I expect that it will be able to one-shot his Venomoth at the end of the fight. It outspeeds, uses Psychic, but since it isn't super effective, it doesn't even do half. And as expected, Rock Slide is able to knock out his ace in one hit. So Graveler has earned itself a speed boost, and now whenever it uses Harden, it's going to trigger badge boosts for attack, defense, and speed. But in order to get the boost for special, I'm also going to need to defeat Blaine, and he's coming up next. But before I fight him, I decided to take on some of the water-type trainers south of Pallet Town. I'm not sure if these people are needed, but I wanted to get a little bit more experience before the late game. I think that Graveler is going to suffer against Lorelei. I expect that that battle is going to be the most difficult in the entire playthrough, and if I arrive at her at a level that's too low, I'm probably going to get walled for a significant period of time. So squeezing in a little bit of extra training right now seemed like the safest play. But I don't want to overdo things, so I stopped fighting trainers and took on Blaine at level 47. I wasn't sure if this was the first fight that I should be using Harden for badge boosts. Increasing my speed would let me move first against all of Blaine's Pokemon, and he can potentially burn Graveler with fire-type moves, which would reduce my attack stat and make me do less damage every turn. Plus the chip damage would be really bad, and even just taking special hits from Blaine's Pokemon will do a lot of damage. That said, I don't think it's required. I think Graveler has more than enough attack to just sweep with Earthquake. I one-shot the Ninetales, one-shot the Rapidash, and move on to his bulkiest Pokemon, Arcanine. It just misses takedown, I hit Earthquake, and I don't one-shot. Blaine's ace does survive on a sliver of health. He tries to save it with a Super Potion, but it's hopeless. I knock out the Arcanine on the next turn and earn myself the Volcano badge. Graveler now has boosts for all of its stats. With this boost, I felt confident going back to fight Erika. I can use Rock Slide to knock out the Tangela, although I am not able to one-shot, which was surprising to me. But because I did so much damage, Erika just uses a Super Potion and I knock it out for free anyways. From there, Earthquake 1 hits the Weepinbell as well as the Gloom. I could have potentially fought Rival 5 in Silph earlier and then gone to Erika at a slightly higher level. Maybe in the optimized playthrough I'll do that just to make her a little bit more secure. With the boosts, Graveler still has to two-shot the Sand Slash at the beginning of the battle, but I have the perfect damage range to trigger another potion use here. Due to this, he doesn't try to use Sand Attack, I finish off his lead, one-shot the Cloyster using Rock Slide, and then from there, Earthquake is so good against his final 3 Pokemon. Now my speed is 1 point too low for the Kadabra. This means it moves first, but Psybeam isn't able to do that much damage and Earthquake 1 hits. Flareon is of course a foregone conclusion. The Silph battle against Giovanni is essentially free for both of these Pokemon, so this is the last time I'm going to mention it. But Sabrina is not necessarily free. She's kind of random in yellow version because she doesn't like to use good moves on every turn. The Abra is first, and this represents a problem for Graveler because I can't outspeed it. That gives her the chance of using Flash on turn 1 and messing my accuracy up for the remainder of the fight. But Flash only has 60% accuracy, so she just misses and then Earthquake one-shots. Kadabra comes in, it has the chance to go for Psychic, but no, it just misses a Kinesis and I knock it out for free. Alakazam sets up with Reflect, so Earthquake can't one-shot. Then she goes for Recover, surviving the next turn, but Alakazam doesn't know that it's already established Reflect, and in Generation 1, this status move never wears off, so when she uses it for a second time, it is purely pointless. Sabrina just handed me a free win. This happens so many times in Pokemon Yellow. She's really not that good. And that's good news for Machoke, but before we go back to its playthrough, let's complete everything up until the Elite Four for Graveler. Giovanni is next, and this has the potential to be difficult for my Rock-type Pokemon. So I train against one optional trainer inside of the gym to level up to 52, because I want to use rare candies now to boost Graveler to a higher level. I didn't want to use all my rare candies because I want to keep some to optimize experience during the Elite Four so that I don't have mid-battle level ups and lose my badge boosts. Hopefully level 60 is going to be all that I need in order to take on the ground-type specialist. The issue with this fight is that 4 of his 5 Pokemon know Earthquake, which is super effective. The Dugtrio also has Dig and Fissure, making it extremely scary for Graveler to go up against right at the beginning of the fight. But Giovanni is sponsored by Guard Spec, so yeah, he just wastes his first turn. I get off a single Harden, improving my defense stat, and then Dugtrio uses Dig, which is ideal for me right now, giving Graveler more time to set up its defense before it gets hit by a super effective move. That said, Dugtrio is very fast. It has a 23% chance to critical hit on any turn. Because of that, Dig critical hits on the next turn, inflicting way more than half damage. It's convenient for me that after 3 uses of Harden, I have just enough speed to move first against all of Giovanni's remaining Pokemon. I just hope that at this level of setup, I'm going to be able to one-hit everything from here, because Rhydon going for Earthquake will definitely finish Graveler now. Earthquake one-shots the Dugtrio, one-shots the Persian, one-shots Nidoqueen, the more defensive of the Nidos, so Nidoking is easy. But the real question is, will Rhydon survive? And the answer is no, because Graveler gets a critical hit. I'll talk about this fight more later on because there is a better way to play things here. But for now, let's move on to the rival before the league. This one's actually really easy for Graveler because his lead Pokemon is Sandslash, and this is the last time it is not going to have Earthquake. That fact allows Graveler to set up as much as it wants here with Harden. I didn't think I needed that many, so I only get to +2. This was also recognizing the fact that I'm about to level up into the Execute, which is a really poor place to level up. Although, if it uses Solar Beam, which is what it does, I'm able to knock it out for free over 2 turns and move on to the Cloyster. Rock Slide is super effective, and despite Cloyster's ridiculous defense, I am able to one-shot. And from there, Earthquake is great against his final 3 Pokemon. Again, the Kadabra is able to attack just like it was in Silph, but it doesn't do much damage. Flareon is easy to finish off. Inside of Victory Road, I pick up one last rare candy, and then Graveler is ready to take on its biggest challenge yet. What is it going to do against Lorelei? Well, I'm going to make all of you wait to see because I want to catch up with Machoke. With the speed boost, Machoke now has 85 speed, which is 1 more than the rival in Silph. After completing some training south of Pallet Town and Pokemon Mansion, I head back to Silph to take on the rival. This is a case where I should mention the difference between Low Kick and Rock Slide, because it seems like they're equivalent against Pokemon like this Cloyster, but they aren't. In Generation 1, Rock Slide does not have a chance to flinch, and Low Kick has a 30% chance to flinch. So in this case, using the fighting type move is superior, and that's one reason I think keeping it around on Machoke's set makes sense, rather than having moves like Earthquake and Dig on the set at the same time. This rival fight is actually really easy for Machoke, although I do get confused, but it doesn't end up causing any problems. With the outspeed on the Kadabra, this is a guaranteed win as long as I don't get a Generation 1 miss once I knock out the Cloyster. I decided to fight Blaine next. This one seems easier than Sabrina, and I want the special boost first before taking on the Psychic type specialist. In this case, I have super effective moves, but Machoke is not quite as good as Graveler was here. Without the same type of attack bonus on moves like Rock Slide or Dig, I'm not able to one-shot the Arcanine. I actually don't even get close because it goes for Reflect. It takes me a total of 3 turns to knock it out. So there is the possibility that Blaine wins here, but he just misses a Fire Blast. Then I use Dig, Arcanine uses Reflect for a second time, mirroring, haha, what it did with Graveler, so I'm able to beat Blaine on my first attempt and earn the badge boost. This prepares Machoke as much as is possible at this point in the game for Sabrina. Unfortunately, just like Graveler, Machoke is slower than all 3 of her Pokemon. Unlike with Graveler, Abra does not miss its Flash, so Machoke is going to have to play this with -1 accuracy. That said, the fact that it did hit me with Flash means that it's badge boosted my attack so that Machoke will do more damage, but just to the Kadabra, because once I knock it out, and it also uses Kinesis further lowering my accuracy, Machoke then levels up, resetting its badge boosts, before the Alakazam comes in. Here's the thing, in Pokemon Yellow, they took away Sabrina's good AI, which I'm not really sure why they did. It doesn't really have a big impact on Pokemon Yellow when you're starting with a Pikachu. Because of this AI quirk, Sabrina doesn't really know what she should be doing. So the Alakazam can use Recover, which does nothing. It can also go for Reflect, wasting some time, and then it can just whiff, doing no damage with Psywave. The only thing I'm scared of it doing is Psychic. And it just doesn't, over and over again. It just sits there. I paralyzed it with Body Slam. It doesn't move. It goes for Reflect a bunch. Eventually I knock it out. So yeah, Sabrina through again. she's really not good in yellow. If you needed proof of it, here it is. 2 back-to-back playthroughs where she just completely drops the ball. At this point in the run, normal type moves are falling off in their usefulness, so Body Slam doesn't really have a place on Machoke's set anymore. I think replacing it with Earthquake at this point, or maybe even earlier into the playthrough, makes more sense. That way I can save some turns instead of using Dig all the time. If you think I should just replace Dig, well, no, it does have one more place where it might be useful for Machoke. I'll talk about that when we get there. For now, let's see if Machoke can manage Giovanni. I'm going into this without using rare candies. I don't think I need them. Dugtrio is first. I have no way to set up, so I'm just going to go for Earthquake right away. Luckily, Giovanni uses a guard spec doing absolutely nothing, and I one-shot his lead. Persian's next. Low kick here is super effective and it can also flinch, but it just one-shots his normal type. Nidoqueen. Earthquake isn't able to one-shot, and his Nido goes for Thunder, which gets a critical hit, doing more than half to Machoke. Alright, this is not good. I knock out the Nidoqueen, move on to Nidoking. It just goes for Leer, which I guess badge boosts Machoke, so it's kind of advantageous, allowing me to one-shot his penultimate Pokemon. But then Rhydon comes in, and I don't think that even with that badge boost, I'm gonna be able to one-shot with Earthquake. So I go for Low Kick in case it flinches. Unfortunately, it doesn't, but Rhydon has no idea what it's doing because Machoke is a fighting type. If I was a rock type, it would have used Earthquake, which is super effective. But as a fighting type, it's randomizing, and in this case, it chooses Horn Drill, which does nothing because Rhydon is slower than Machoke. Because of that, I'm able to knock it out on the next turn and defeat Giovanni with no resets. Okay, one scary thing about Rival 6 for Machoke. It underspeeds the Kadabra, and the Kadabra has Psychic. But like Sabrina's team, this Kadabra has a bunch of other moves that aren't going to one-shot. I'll survive a hit from Psybeam, and Reflect won't do anything. But the Rival does have good AI, so this Kadabra's never going to go for Recover. By the time I knock out the Sandslash, which takes 3 hits, I've sustained some damage. Then I have to 2-shot the Execute. Luckily, it isn't able to hit me with a status condition, and then I 2-shot the Cloyster, which uses Supersonic before it goes down. Luckily for Machoke, it snaps out of confusion immediately on the Magneton and 1 hits with Earthquake. But the question is, will I survive a hit from the Kadabra, or will it just go for Reflect? In this case, it chooses Psybeam, doing a ton of damage. And Machoke holds on with 5 hit points. Earthquake one-shots and I outspeed the Flareon, so the rival's defeated. So, because Machoke doesn't have access to any badge boosting moves, I want to play the next section of the game quite conservatively. Inside Victory Road, I pick up an extra rare candy. This one costs less than 10 seconds, and in most playthroughs it makes sense to grab it. I'm also going to fight a bunch of additional trainers to level up to 57 before leaving the cave. And then I backtrack to the power plant to grab 1 additional rare candy before I felt ready for the league. Using all of the candies now, I have 12 of them, I can boost Machoke from level 57 all the way up to level 69. Now, I think we're ready to completely smash the Elite Four. Lorelei is first. This is the case where Dig can be useful. You'll go underground on turn 1, Dugong can't attack on that turn, then you do damage, Dugong has priority for rest on turn 2. Because of this, it's probably going to go to sleep. You can set up and then knock out the remainder of her Pokemon. But for Machoke, since Rock Slide is able to one-shot the Dugong, Dig doesn't actually have any additional utility here like I thought it might. If I was, say, 2-shotting the Dugong, then I could Dig on turn 1, avoid damage, have it use rest, and then 2-shot. But that's not the case. Cloyster, on the other hand, is a 2-shot, and so is the Slowbro that follows. This one is very scary. It's setting up with Amnesia always on turn 2, but sometimes on turn 1. It has a 50% chance. And then, once it gets to turn 3, if it's set up twice with Amnesia, it could potentially hit Machoke with an absolutely massive Psychic. But it's not going to get the chance because I have enough damage to knock it out before that would ever be the case. So a turn 1 Psychic is the worst case scenario here, and I'm pretty sure that Machoke would be able to survive that. Jinx is a 1-hit since it's physically frail, leaving only Lapras. I go for Low Kick, hopefully to flinch. Unfortunately, I don't. Lapras body slams and paralyzes Machoke. Then it outspeeds using Confuse Ray, but despite the Parafusion, Machoke is able to move, hit with Low Kick, and knock out Lorelei's ace. The next guy's a Hiker. I don't really have a lot to say about this other than the fact that the Hitmonchan surprisingly survives an Earthquake. That gives it a chance to potentially freeze with Ice Punch, but you always have to remember that it can also use Fire Punch and and defrost Pokemon. So I'm never really scared of the Hitmonchan. The Hitmonlee, the Onix, they're both one hits. The Machamp could use Submission, but it could also just go for Leer and miss. Agatha's next. This one's also really easy if you have both Earthquake and Rock Slide on your moveset. The only downside here for Machoke is that it's slower than the Gengar by 5 speed, and it's quite a bit slower than her ace Gengar. But since I'm one-shotting everything with either Earthquake or Rock Slide, there isn't really a lot to fear here. The first Gengar could use Confuse Ray for some chip damage, or potentially Paralyze with Lick. The Golbat, the Haunter, and the Arbok are all simple, leaving only the final Gengar as the second threat. It could use Confuse Ray, Psychic, or Hypnosis, but it could also just go for Dream Eater when I'm not asleep and do nothing. In this case, that is exactly what she does, giving me a free and easy win. Okay, one more Elite Four member. Now, if this was Red and Blue, the next battle would be essentially free, because Lance's Pokemon have Agility and Barrier in those games, and they just spam those moves over and over again against Poison and Fighting type Pokemon, never choosing to attack. The only two Pokemon on his team that can attack Poison and Fighting types are Gyarados and Aerodactyl, and while the Gyarados is the same between Yellow and Red and Blue, the Aerodactyl has much worse moves in Pokemon Red and Blue. But in Yellow version, it has Flying type moves, Fly and Wing Attack. This represents a significant problem for Machoke. Aerodactyl is always going to move first. Lance has good AI, he is always going to choose either Wing Attack or Fly. I assume Fly will do massive damage. Aerodactyl has a high critical hit chance, 25%. So what I'm really hoping for is that I get the 50% roll, he chooses Wing Attack, Machoke survives, and then is able to one-shot both Aerodactyl and Dragonite using Rock Slide. But I'm not really that hopeful with my damage ranges using Rock Slide, especially against the Dragonite. I have to two-shot even the Gyarados, so it's able to hit with Hydro Pump before it goes down. Then I have to use Earthquake on the Dragonairs, and I was expecting this to be a guaranteed one-hit. It looked like it was on the first Dragonair, but then the second one survives on red health. That's really not good. Machoke got lucky here because Lance uses a Hyper Potion and I get to re-roll my damage range. The Dragonair survives again. Then he uses Wrap and luckily misses, doing no damage. So I move on to the Aerodactyl in an okay position, but it chooses Fly, and this does enough damage to knock out Machoke when it gets a critical hit. I tried again and the fight looked like it was going worse for me. I make it to the Aerodactyl with orange health. However, this time it doesn't critical hit with Fly and it does way less damage than I was expecting. Machoke survives on red health, hits with Rock Slide, and Aerodactyl faints. So let's see what the damage range is like against Dragonite. Well, we're actually not going to get a chance because the Dragonair lowered my speed with Bubble Beam, and because of that, Dragonite moves first, hits Fire Blast, and Machoke faints. Now, losing late into the fight, like against the Aerodactyl or the Dragonite, wastes a lot of time to resets, and after the Aerodactyl crit me with another Fly, I decided to try to change things up with this strategy to make things a bit more consistent. I teach Machoke Rest in the place of Dig. This way, once I knock out the Gyarados, I can potentially heal any damage it did with Hydro Pump or Hyper Beam. The only downside here is if I'm healing against the Dragonair, then it gives it chances to use repeated Bubble Beams, lowering my speed, putting me in the same position I was in last time. So because of the speed drop, I once again lose to the Dragonite in what was an even longer battle because I'm using Rest. The bad news for Machoke just continues. I lose again to the Dragonite because I didn't have enough health to survive its hit. Then Aerodactyl gets another critical hit, knocking me out from green health. That would have been perfect if it didn't get the crit, but in the next battle, things finally line up the way I need them to. Aerodactyl doesn't crit with Fly, I survive with roughly half health, and this might be enough to survive a hit from Dragonite. I do more than half with Rock Slide, Dragonite goes for Blizzard, and Machoke hangs on. Because of that, I'm able to attack one more time and finish off Lance's Dragonite. This fight was really rough. I need a different solution for next time. We'll talk about that later, because for now, there's only one more battle for Machoke. Let's face the champion. There is the potential for this to be extremely rough because we are not faster than the Alakazam, giving it a chance to use either Psybeam, Psychic, or Kinesis. Machoke also has to two-shot the Sandslash at the beginning of the fight, taking damage from either Slash, Poison Sting, Earthquake, or Fury swipes. Once it goes down, Alakazam comes out, and I think here it has to use Psybeam, otherwise I'm going to faint. It goes for the weaker Psychic type move, and then Earthquake gets the one-shot. Okay, perfect. Executor sees that it has Hypnosis, which it view is super effective against the fighting type, so it's going to use this move. But I can counter that by going for rest, healing on turn 1, and then it whiffs hypnosis. And to knock out the Executor quickly, because Rock Slide is going to take some time, I have taught Machoke Fissure in the place of Low Kick. This way I can one-shot the Executor, moving on from it quickly. Magneton is a one-hit using Earthquake. For Cloyster, I have Rock Slide, which can two-shot. I take some damage from Clamp, but it's not enough to make me worried. Well, it wasn't until Machoke missed with its second Rock Slide and I took another hit from Clamp. Then I missed another Rock Slide. Cloyster goes for Spike Cannon, slowly draining Machoke's health. Okay, Rock Slide, do not ruin this for me. I go for it, and it finally hits, knocking out the Cloyster. Flareon is slower. It also has Reflect, so it's trapped using the Psychic move, meaning the final Pokemon on the rival's team is free. I hit with Earthquake, and it goes down. Machoke clocks in with a time of 56 minutes even, with 7 resets, 2 blackouts at level 72, with a game time of 3 hours and 26 minutes. Starting the league at 51 minutes and 40 seconds, Graveler has the chance of beating Machoke's time because of how awful Lance was. But will Graveler be able to get through Lorelei without significant delays? I think the answer to that is going to be no. I expect this fight to be absolutely brutal. In this case, turn 1 Dig is almost a necessity for Graveler to avoid turn 1 Bubble Beam from Dugong. Also, I burned some of my rare candies before this fight so that Graveler is level 65, giving it the best possible damage ranges against Lorelei's Ice Water type Pokemon. Now, I'm not going to spend an in-depth amount of time talking about how Lorelei's AI works here. Just know that it's not always going to use Rest on turn 2 with Dugong. She also has a chance to roll Bubble Beam or Aurora Beam since the Dugong views those moves as super effective. But there is a chance that her AI is going to deprioritize these moves, and then since it's the second turn in battle, it will prioritize Rest and go for the healing move. I need to essentially wait until that happens, because if Dugong chooses Bubble Beam, look at how much damage it does. It one-shots Graveler from full health. Okay, so 1 reset to Lorelei. In the second fight, I do a ton of damage with Dig, triggering Lorelei's AI to use a Super Potion on the Dugong instead of attacking. Then, instead of knocking it out, I assumed she was going to use Rest and went for Harden to Badge Boost. And she does go for Rest, giving me time to set up with Harden to +3. Then I use Rock Slide and Graveler is able to one-shot the Dugong, but I might not be able to one-shot the Cloyster. If I can't, then Clamp will inflict massive damage and I assume Graveler's gonna faint. This is why I think Graveler could be stuck here for a very long time. But I get the damage I need and Cloyster goes down in a single hit. Okay, on turn 1, Slowbro is going to go for Surf. On turn 2, because of AI modification 2, it's going to use Withdraw. So I just need to win the first 50-50 flip, but that's not even the case. I do enough damage to the Slowbro to put it in Super Potion range, so instead of trying to attack on turn 1, she just heals and I knock it out for free. Jinx is a one hit and I move on to the Lapras. Is Graveler going to do this with only 1 reset? And the answer is yes. Lapras faints to a single Rock Slide and Graveler pulls through. I think I just got extremely lucky. Okay, there's this guy, he's next. Graveler has absolutely no problems here. I even one-shot the Hitmonchan, so it isn't able to go for Ice Punch. Yeah, I have nothing to say. Next is Agatha. She's bad. Yeah, a bunch of her Pokemon are faster than Graveler, and yes, the first Gengar in Yellow version has Mega Drain, but no, it doesn't use it because Agatha doesn't have good AI. While she tries to mess me up with status conditions, Graveler just sweeps her entire team using Earthquake, with the final Gengar missing a Hypnosis before it's knocked out. Okay, so we've arrived at another trainer who has the potential to be difficult for Graveler. Lance leads with Gyarados, and because of type effectiveness, it is always going to be choosing Hydro Pump. For Graveler, I assume that it either needs to miss or I need to one-shot with Rock Slide. And I one-shot with Rock Slide. Earthquake then one-shots both Dragonairs. Aerodactyl comes out, but unlike Machoke, I am not scared of any of its moves. I finish it with Rock Slide in a single hit and move on to the Dragonite. Okay, here's the most unfortunate speed comparison in this entire run. Graveler right now has 113 speed and the Dragonite has 114, meaning it's gonna move first and hit with Blizzard. And since I have to two-shot with Rock Slide, the Dragonite is gonna be able to attack twice with Blizzard. Here's the thing though, I don't need to worry about this because I'm not leveling up during the battle. I can just set up Harden to badge boost myself as much as I want. This allows Graveler to increase its speed stats so that it can move first against the Dragonite and increase its damage so that it can one-shot the Dragonite with Rock Slide. An easy solution. Now, only one fight left. Let's see if the champion can stop Graveler. Right now, it is on track to get a faster time than Machoke in its first playthrough, despite the slow start. The champion leads with Sandslash, and this one is locked into Earthquake because of my type. That means I take super effective damage equal to half of Graveler's health before I knock out his lead. This is not a good position to start in. I have taught Graveler rest at this point so that I can heal and potentially set up with Harden later into the fight, and there is an ideal place to do this, right after I knock out the Alakazam. But in order to get by it needs to use a move that's not going to knock out Graveler. It chooses Psybeam, and I thought I would survive this, but Alakazam got a critical hit. Because of that, Graveler took a single reset, and then I tried again. Two-shot the Sandslash, move on to Alakazam, roughly the same health I had last time, a little bit more. It goes for Psybeam, this one doesn't get a critical hit, I knock it out and move on to the Executor. Now, because of type effectiveness, there's a very weird interaction here. The grass type sees that it can use Leech Seed for super effective damage, but unlike other non-volatile status conditions, this volatile status condition isn't checked by the AI, so it doesn't know that it's already set up Leech Seed and that it should start using other moves. Because of this, it just keeps spamming Leech Seed over and over and over again, giving me as much time as I want to use Harden and Rest in combination with each other to set up with Graveler. From there, all of its stats are ridiculous. I can knock out the Executor with a single Rock Slide, and then I one-hit Magneton with Earthquake, one-hit Cloyster with Rock Slide, and one-shot Flareon using Earthquake. Graveler clocks in with a first playthrough time of 56 minutes and 37 seconds, with 6 resets, 1 blackout at level 68, with a game time of 3 hours and 37 minutes. I want to look at the timeline graphs for these two playthroughs because I think they're very interesting to compare. With Machoke, you can see that it breezes through the early game, but then really slows down in the mid game, but really hits a wall by the time it reaches Lance. Graveler, on the other hand, has a really slow Brock and Misty split, but the splits after that are all very fast. It has this giant long Blaine split because that's where I did all of my training, and then the late game is just a lot more concise when compared with Machoke. I have to say, after I finished these two playthroughs, I was really surprised at how even these two Pokemon were. But if I'm really thinking about it, that mirrors what happened with their final evolutions. When I did my Golem versus Machamp video many years ago, I was so surprised at how close these two Pokemon were. It was the first video that I went back and did multiple playthroughs in because I wanted to see which Pokemon really was better, and I knew that I needed more data points in order to make my point. If I just said Graveler is the worst Pokemon right now after these first playthrough results, I think all of you would be pretty skeptical. So let's get into the follow-up playthroughs and see how these two stack up after optimization. With Graveler, there's going to be a choice between two different routes to play, a safe and a risky route, but with Machoke, it doesn't have the same options. Because of the lack of setup, it's kind of on rails until the late game. The task here is to figure out what level it needs at the end of the game to get by both Lance and the champion. After that's determined, then everything earlier in the route can be figured out. But for the sake of this video and editing, we're going to go through everything sequentially. I spent a lot of time on it during the first playthrough, but I really have to emphasize the fact that the early game for Machoke is a complete joy. Minimum battles to Brock. Brock is very easy unless he gets really lucky with Bind like he did during my first playthrough, but that's an unlikely event. Then on Route 3, minimum battles and minimum Pokemon. In Mount Moon, no optional battles, just fight the Super Nerd and Jesse and James, and then make your way into Cerulean City, because the rival is really easy due to our type effectiveness. Okay, let's talk about Machoke's moveset, because I added one move in that I didn't have in my first playthrough, and that's Mega Punch. This gives me better damage ranges against Misty's Pokemon right after completing Nugget Bridge. I have a 53.1% chance to knock out the Staryu in a single hit, and I get that here. Starmie's a little bit more complicated. If she uses Harden or an X-Defend, then I want to start using Karate Chop for the upside of the critical hit. But if she doesn't use these, then Mega Punch does do more damage to the Starmie. There's the chance that Machoke can miss here. There's also the chance that she goes for Bubble Beam over and over again, which will do a lot of damage to Machoke. During my playthroughs with Machoke, I was accepting one reset to her here. If I got two, I would restart the run entirely. The early game is so easy and fun to play that it's not really painful getting back to Misty and then trying her again. Plus, since she's randomizing her move selection, it's usually possible for Machoke to get through here on its first attempt. And that's what happens in this, my third playthrough. From here, the route needs to start planning for Koga. So let's talk through all of the optional battles that I do in the mid game in order to give Machoke the level boost that it needs. First of all, the one rocket to get into the hideout, because picking up the candy here is very important for Machoke. After completing Pokemon Tower, I head to Silph, and here I'm going to train extensively. Machoke Rocket, 4 Rocket, this guy who I don't really have a name for yet. Maybe he's the Zealous Pawn Grunt because Zealous Pawn told me that I should fight this guy. The Reception Rocket, the Muck Scientist, the Grimy Scientist, the Stacked Scientist, the Protein Scientist, the Mandatory Arbok Grunt, the Triantist, Hypno Sandwich, and finally the Electrode Wheezing guy just outside of the Rivals Chamber. Now that I have Earthquake on my set, I'm going to leave Silph and head to Cycling Road to do additional training. Grimy Biker, Wheezing Biker, I accidentally ran into this guy with a single Machoke. Whoops, it's rare that this happens. Anyways, he's not going to waste that much time. Then intentionally, I'm fighting this Cue Ball who has 2 fighting types, and finally the Biker Boss. Back in Celadon City, I'm going to fight the Cool Trainer in Erika's gym and then take her on. At level 42, I have a 2-hit with Body Slam against the Tangela, a guarantee with Earthquake on the Weepin' Bell, and a 55.5% chance to one-shot the Gloom using Earthquake. There is some potential downside here, but it's very low with these damage ranges. After that, Machoke is almost ready to fight Koga. I'm going to fight the 2 optional tamers inside of his gym, so that once I beat the mandatory juggler at the end of the gym, Machoke levels up to 45 over a damage rounding threshold. This gives decent ranges against Koga's Pokemon. Because of accuracy, I have a 90% chance to knock out both of the first 2 Venonats when using Rock Slide, but because of Machoke's level, only a 73.1% chance on the 3rd Venonat, and I need to one-shot all of these Pokemon. Venomoth with Psychic does between 65 and 76% damage with a single hit, and it's guaranteed to knock out Machoke if it gets a critical hit. The thing is, I have Body Slam, so I'm going to attack at least once, and my goal here is to paralyze the Venomoth and then attack for a 2nd time in a row, knocking it out. This is the first fight in Machoke's run that's really brutal, and it does feel exclusively luck-based. Right now, Rock Slide does between 71 and 84% damage to the Venomoth with a single hit. There are 2 ways theoretically to approach this fight more consistently. Number 1, get Rock Slide to one-shot the Venomoth. And number 2, make it so that Psychic never does more than 50% damage. At level 53, Machoke has a 64.7% chance to one-shot the Venomoth. And then over the next damage rounding threshold at level 55, both of the damage ranges become better. Rock Slide is a guaranteed 1 hit provided it doesn't miss, and Psychic does between 43 and 51% damage. The problem is, all of this gets nicer 10 levels higher than I was previously. So I can either win at level 45 using Body Slam and Paralysis and a little bit of luck, likely with some resets, or I can level 10 more times on really inefficient trainers throughout the mid-game and then fight Koga after wasting a bunch of time. I probably would have done this 2 or 3 years ago, but with my modern knowledge, it doesn't make any sense. Fighting Koga at level 45 and lucking through is definitely the better choice to preserve real time as much as possible. Unfortunately, in this run, I have 3 resets before I finally beat Koga. I wasn't expecting to get by him with no resets. I was hoping for a result that was 1 reset or 2 resets, but I'll take 3. With Koga finished, I can go back to the rival in Silph. Now Machoke has enough speed to move first against the Kadabra. The only 2 Pokemon that take multiple hits to knock out here are the Sandslash and then the Cloyster. I have Low Kick for the 2nd Pokemon. It's going to be a 2-hit, it's an 82.5% chance, and then I one-shot the Magneton, the Kadabra, and the Flareon. Inside Blaine's gym, I continue my optional training, fighting the first 2 trainers. If I had skipped this training, I would have gone into the battle against Blaine at level 48 with a 69.5% chance to one-shot the Ninetales and a 2-hit on the Arcanine. But with the extra training at level 49, I have a 76.6% chance on the Ninetales, a guarantee on the Rapidash, and still a 2-hit on the Arcanine. Blaine is one of the most difficult gym leaders in Pokemon Yellow, and today with Machoke, he gives me 2 resets before I defeat him. A little bit more optional training. Inside of Saffron City Gym, I take a diagonal path and then fight this Psychic who has 4 Pokemon. His experience yields are very good. After that, I take on Sabrina. This fight is going to be random with Machoke, there's no way around it, so there's the potential for resets here. I was just hoping not to have any. But unfortunately today, Sabrina does get me once. With her defeated, I can fight the 2 mandatory trainers inside the Viridian City Gym, and then Machoke is level 52, allowing me to use 8 rare candies to go to level 60 before facing Giovanni. Damage ranges here are quite favorable. A one-shot on the Dugtrio, a 90% chance with Low Kick on the Persian, a 67.2% chance on Nidoqueen, but a guarantee on Nidoking. And then Rhydon's a 2-shot using Earthquake, but because of type effectiveness, it really doesn't know what to do. to, making Giovanni fairly easy for Machoke to manage. The rival is easy one more time before Victory Road, and then I fight 3 cool trainers inside the final cave of the game. The guy who has all the starter Pokemon in the first area, the trainer with Parasect, Dugong, and Chansey, and finally the guy I call Cool Water who has 3 water types near the end of the cave. This brings Machoke up to level 63, and then I can use 3 rare candies prior to Lorelei to go to level 66. I had 1 reset against her because of Slowbro using Psychic. This is the only challenge that Machoke has in the league until it gets to the randomness that is Agatha. And I don't really want to cover her since my moves are great against her team provided she isn't going for things like Confuse Ray and messing Machoke up. The rare candies that I used earlier on lines everything up so that once I defeat Agatha, Machoke is level 68 over a damage rounding threshold, which prepares me for Lance. This gives a 2-hit on the Gyarados with Rock Slide, 2 hits on both Dragonairs using Earthquake, but you'll notice that I now have taught Machoke Mimic. I'm going to steal Ice Beam from the second Dragonair because it is more effective against Lance's Pokemon, specifically the Dragonair and the Dragonite. I have a 74.2% chance to one-shot the Dragonair when using Ice Beam, and a 69.5% chance to one-shot the Dragonite. Aerodactyl is better to hit with Rock Slide, it has a 75.2% chance to one-shot, whereas Ice Beam is a guaranteed 2-hit. The maximum range without a critical hit is 97% damage. Machoke just needs to get lucky here, that's really all it comes down to. And in this playthrough I have quite a few resets, a total of 5 before I get the luck I need to defeat Lance. I'll just pause briefly here and go over damage ranges at level 70 because they do change in favor of Machoke. A 41% chance to one-shot the Dragonair when using Earthquake guarantees with Ice Beam against the Dragonair and the Dragonite, and unless Rock Slide misses, it's going to one-shot the Aerodactyl. But 2 more levels would take quite a bit of time, and the ranges at level 68 are quite favorable anyway. I don't think leveling 2 more times is the correct choice. The 5 resets here I had to Lance is maybe equivalent in time to the training that I would have needed to do to beat him consistently at level 70, and 2 extra levels are not going to help me against the champion. So by doing things at a lower level, I'm leaving myself more upside to capitalize on with Machoke. I think that's something that I missed when I was doing these challenges earlier on in my career as a solo challenge runner. I prioritized consistency because I felt like resets were always going to be a time loss, but that's just not the case. Sometimes you're stacking the deck in favor of the Pokemon getting an even better result. The champion is a frustrating battle for Machoke. If you look at my speed right now, it's 145 and Alakazam's is 156. It seems like we're fairly close to moving first against the Psychic type, which would make this battle much more consistent. Here's the thing though, Alakazam with a Psychic does between 68 and 81% damage. If I just use Fissure, knock out the Sandslash in a single hit, and reset if I don't, then I can move on to Alakazam and survive any of the moves that it throws at me. Fissure gives me a fast solution to the Executor. By the way, I decided to play this fight out after I got hit by Kinesis from the Alakazam, but I still hit Fissure on the Executor, which is perfect. From there, the rival's team is not as equipped to defeat Machoke. I can one-shot the Magneton using Earthquake, 2-shot the Cloyster using Low Kick, and then one-shot the final Flareon. In my 3rd playthrough with Machoke, I get a time of 48 minutes and 47 seconds. That's 48 seconds faster than my 2nd playthrough, which was a time of 49 minutes and 35 seconds. Because I get fairly obsessive with these things, I did play a 4th playthrough with Machoke and try to get an even better result, but unfortunately, I got a worse playthrough time with this one, with 13 resets. So Graveler's time to beat is 48 minutes and 47 seconds. Before we get into the runs with it, I want to give a huge shout out to Zealous Pawn for his help optimizing both of these 2 Pokemon. It was really helpful to be able to share ideas, especially when concerning the Graveler route, because the 2 different options here feel like they are going to be fundamentally different. There is a safe option against Lorelei and in the late game, and then there is a much more risky option. The risky strategy fights Lorelei at level 58, whereas the safe option fights her at level 63. The reason the level 58 strategy is risky against Lorelei is because we're relying on the fact that we're going to put the Cloyster into Super Potion range, and then it won't attack with Clamp because Lorelei is going to heal it. If she doesn't heal it, then Graveler just loses over and over again until she finally uses the Super Potion. The more consistent strategy, 5 levels higher at level 63, just one-shots the Cloyster so that we don't have to worry about it. I wanted to get the best possible time for this rock type, so when I sat down to do the challenge, I decided to play the risky strategy first to see what I could pull off. We'll go through it first, and then we're going to cover the more consistent approach. First of all, in the early stages of the game, we want to fight Brock at level 14 with enough experience to level up after knocking out the Geodude to be level 15 for the Onix over the damage rounding threshold. This ensures that we do 2 damage per hit and we don't run out of tackle PP. For early game training, I fought all of the trainers except the rival on Route 22. So now let's talk about preparing for Misty. Unlike my previous playthrough, I'm not going to do any training on Route 3 or in Mount Moon. The rival on Nugget Bridge is extremely easy, so I can fight all of these trainers and then head through Route 24 and 25, soaking up additional experience here. Just fighting mandatory trainers brings Graveler up to level 23 by the time it's done this route. And then I head south towards the SS Anne, fighting more mandatory trainers on my way. Inside the boat, I'm going to do a bunch of optional training. I fight the youngster to get access to the Body Slam TM, and then this Fisher as well as this gentleman inside this one compartment, the gentleman candy, the rival, and then I backtrack and fight this one guy at the beginning of the boat with 2 Growlithe. This gives Graveler enough experience to level up after the junior trainer in Misty's gym to get to 28. Notice here I don't have enough speed, but I can use 2 rare candies to go from 28 to 30 before Misty to move first against the Staryu. Using the candies here eliminates so much early game training, and in doing so saves a lot of time. The goal with these solo challenges is to do as little training as possible as late as possible into the run. Adding complexity to this is the fact that you want to use rare candies as early as you can into the playthrough, because they eliminate training that you have to do and they make battles more consistent earlier on, as well as shaving off turns when you would have been 2-hitting but now you're 1-hitting. The only caveat around rare candies is that sometimes using them too early into the playthrough means that your Pokemon has to do way more training in the late game, and that can waste time. So there's a balance that has to be found here. But for Graveler, using these 2 rare candies is a massive advantage. We're going to do a bit of a time skip now into the mid game. In Celadon City, Graveler does not need to go into the Rocket Hideout to collect an additional rare candy. This is an advantage it has over Machoke when I'm using the risky route. The mid-game training is also a lot lighter than with Machoke. The Wheezing Biker and Biker Boss on Cycling Road, and then only 1 Tamer inside of Koga's gym. After I defeat the Bug Poison Specialist, then inside of Silph, I'm going to fight a total of 6 additional trainers. Machoke Candy, 4 Rocket, Stacked Scientist, Protein Scientist, the mandatory Arbok trainer, and the Electrode Wheezing trainer outside of the rival's room. This lets me use 3 rare candies prior to the rival to be level 45 for this fight. I have a 2-shot on the Sandslash and a 38.3% chance to one-shot the Cloyster. If it uses Clamp, I lose, but if it goes for Withdraw or Aurora Beam, then Graveler still has a chance, because once the Cloyster goes down, I one-shot all 3 remaining Pokemon. Inside of Erika's gym, I'm going to minimize the number of turns I'm in battle by fighting the Beauty because I don't need additional experience. By the way, at level 47, Earthquake has a 95% chance to one-shot this Grass-type Pokemon, so that's why I chose to do this battle. Erika's next. I have a 2-shot with Rock Slide on the Tangela, and then Guarantees with Earthquake on the Weepinbell and the Gloom. Blaine's easy. There's a 44.9% chance that I one-shot the Arcanine with Earthquake. Everything else is a guarantee. Because of our speed interaction, Sabrina's kind of annoying. I take 2 resets here in this playthrough. There's nothing I can do about that. I hate dropping time here, but it is what it is. Staying on minimum battles from Sabrina to Giovanni, I fight him at level 49. The key here is that I already have the damage range I need to one-shot the Dugtrio at the beginning of the fight. This is ideal, because then I can move on to the Persian, level up to 50, this goes over a damage rounding threshold, and then against the normal type, I can set up Harden as many times as I want, badge boosting my attack stat. Plus 4 gives an 88% chance to one-shot the Rhydon with Earthquake, and plus 5 gives a guarantee. I got a little bit obsessed here and went all the way to plus 6. This is not required and I wasted a small amount of time, but in the end, Giovanni is very easy as long as I'm knocking the Dugtrio out right away. Then against the rival, my experience lines up much better than it did last time. I can set up at the beginning of the battle against the Sandslash and sweep the remainder of his team, leveling up before the Flareon, which really doesn't matter. Okay, 1 optional battle in Victory Road. The Cool Trainer with Chansey. This brings Graveler to level 53, then with 5 rare candies, I can go to 58 and fight Lorelei. Turn 1, dig because I want to go underground to avoid Dugong's first attack. Then it needs to go for rest on the next turn, allowing me to set up. If it doesn't rest and instead it attacks, I'm just going to reset right away and try again. These are very fast faults, which is another reason why I like this strategy over training 5 extra levels, because those levels are never going to be fast. But I could luck through Lorelei with a single attempt here, although that's not going to happen in this playthrough. What I want to have happen is the Dugong uses Rest, giving me 2 turns to set up with Harden. This gives Rock Slide 83 to 98% damage against the Cloyster. Lorelei uses her super potions when her Pokemon fall below 20% health, and she has a 50% chance of using the super potion. So there are only 2 ways to fail against the Cloyster. Lorelei doesn't use the super potion, or I miss with Rock Slide. As you can see, I'm resetting a bunch here. And even when I make it by the Cloyster, the run is still not free, because Slowbro is next, and it has to go for Withdraw on turn 1. If he uses Surf on turn 1, then I instantly lose. But if he uses Withdraw, then I can 2-shot it. By the way, there is another interaction here. I could use Dig on turn 1, avoiding the Surf, then attack into it on turn 2, and try to get a follow-up attack after that. The problem is, even by doing this, it still has a chance of using 1 Surf because it can survive my attacks. If it goes for Withdraw on turn 1 when I use Dig, then I have to 3-shot. But Dig does improve the odds here slightly, and it's a strategy I learned when I did subsequent runs. Once the Slowbro goes down, I am still not in the clear. While the Jinx is a 1-hit, the Lapras, I have a 44.8% chance to 1-shot using Rock Slide. The thing is, with this damage range, it's also likely that she will use another Super Potion here to try to save her ace. So it isn't quite as bad as the damage range makes it out to be. In today's playthrough, I have a total of 6 resets to Lorelei before I defeat her. Overall, I think this is a pretty good result against her. She's one of the most difficult trainers in the entire run for Graveler, and I just cleared her with only 6 resets, cutting so much training out of this route. But we're still not through all the awfulness that the risky route has to offer, because against Lance, we're only level 60. Rock Slide has a 42.6% chance to 1-shot the Gyarados, and Graveler underspeeds. The strategy here is fairly simple. On turn 1, I'm going to be going for Harden to get a badge boost. This will ensure that Rock Slide 1-shots the Gyarados on the next turn, and that Graveler moves first. It also improves damage ranges against the first Dragonair. The concession with this strategy is that I have to wait until the Gyarados misses with Hydro Pump. It can take quite some time for this to happen, but eventually I pull it off and I move on to the Dragonair. With 1 turn of Harden, I have a guaranteed 1-shot here with Earthquake. But then there's a small problem in this route. I level up to 61 before the next Dragonair, losing my badge boosts. At level 61, I have an 83.2% chance to 1-shot this Dragonair. And in this case, I just barely don't get the damage range I need. Dragonair goes for Ice Beam. This doesn't do enough damage to knock out Graveler, but it does inflict Freeze. So after 8 resets to Lance, I have to reset again and continue trying. And I was so frustrated here because I got a ridiculous number of resets before I made it back to this second Dragonair. Now I have 31. Luckily, this time around, I am able to beat all of Lance's Pokemon and move on to the champion. The solution here is very similar to Machoke. I'm going to go for Fissure on the Sandslash to avoid Earthquake on turn 1, preserving my health for the Alakazam, which is going to move first. The complexity of this fight isn't done yet though. It seems like setting up on the Executor would make the most sense, but this isn't actually how things play out. I want to knock out the Executor using Fissure and then set up on the Magneton so that I can outspeed the Cloyster and 1-shot with Rock Slide. Once I do that, I can finish off his final Pokemon, and in this playthrough, I get a time of 53 minutes and 11 seconds, with 36 resets, finishing the game at level 62 with a game time of 2 hours and 57 minutes. So even though I took the risky approach, I still got a better time than my first run by 3 minutes and 26 seconds. But I wasn't satisfied with this. After how awful Lance ended up being, I decided to come back and play the conservative approach to see if I could get a better time. For this route, I'm still using 2 rare candies prior to Misty to make that battle as concise as possible. I'm going to do my training in the mid-game, and I'm also going to add in the rare candy from the hideout. I'm not going to go through every single trainer that I fight here, just know that it's way more people than I would otherwise like to battle. I conclude my training by fighting 5 trainers inside of Victory Road, and then using 9 rare candies before Lorelei to go to level 63. Now, there is still the possibility here against her that the Dugong just knocks me out. There's also the possibility that I miss Rock Slide on the Cloyster, but if I do hit, I'm more likely to knock it out. I have an 83.5% chance to 1-shot. And then against the Slowbro, I'm going to 2-hit, and on the final Lapras, I will 1-shot. I got to Lorelei with a total of 7 resets, which is not a great position to be in, and then against her, I continue getting resets. Even though this is the consistent strategy, I ended up resetting here more times than I did with the risky strategy. Lance is easier now, but the champion is still risky for Graveler to go up against. And in the end, when I finished this playthrough, I got a time of 54 minutes and 35 seconds, with 19 resets. That is 1 minute and 24 seconds slower than my previous run using the risky strategy. The conclusion that I came to with Graveler, and the conclusion conclusion that Zealous Pawn came to with it as well is that this Pokemon doesn't really benefit from being played in a consistent way. You just sacrifice a bunch of time and there is no upside available. Whereas playing the riskier route gives you so much upside, and even in some of the worst case scenarios like we saw in my previous run, the risky route still can perform better than the conservative route. So for my 4th playthrough, to ensure that I did the same number between both Pokemon, I came back and I played the risky route again with Graveler. Things were going very well by the time I made it to Lorelei. I only had a single reset. By this time, I have learned the dig strategy against the Slowbro, and I can't believe I'm saying this. I beat Lorelei on my first attempt. No resets to her. You know how they say fortune favors the bold? This is an example of that. When you play risky, sometimes amazing stuff like this happens. Graveler is now set up for an absolutely incredible finish. Don't worry, the luck's gonna get balanced out. Bad stuff happens against Gengar on Agatha's team. I get hit by Confuse Ray and Toxic, and then because of the 2 status conditions, I end up losing here to her final Gengar, wasting a bunch of time. Don't worry, I beat her on my 2nd attempt, no additional resets here. Okay, so how bad is Lance gonna be? Well, he's actually not that bad. I luck through this one fairly quickly with only a total of 3 resets. So now I am 5 minutes and 47 seconds faster than my previous attempt at the risky strategy. Unfortunately for me in my first battle against the champion, I don't have time to set up against the Magneton because I'm getting my health drained by Leech Seed. This is what happens when you don't one-shot the Executor right away with Fissure. I probably should have cut my losses and just reset as soon as I missed the Fissure on the grass type, but I didn't, so I have to reset here and I lose a bunch of time. I have a total of 2 resets here. By the way, I have to get all the way to +6 so that I can one-shot the Cloyster using Rock Slide. When I do, I take it out, finish off the Flareon, and Graveler clocks in with a time in my 4th playthrough of 47 minutes and 30 seconds, with 8 resets at level 62, with a game time of 2 hours and 56 minutes. This result is 5 minutes and 41 seconds faster than my previous attempt at the risky strategy. And you might be curious how this would go if I did it multiple times. Is this route more likely to yield a time closer to 47 minutes or closer to 53 minutes? Well, luckily for us, Zealous Pawn ran the route 4 times, and his results were 48 minutes and 42 seconds, 49 minutes and 52 seconds, 51 minutes and 40 seconds, and 46 minutes and 48 seconds. So this route is more likely to give a time to Graveler that is under 50 minutes. The result that I got in my previous playthrough was the outlier of all of our results, and I think it's because of that one freeze from Lance's Dragonair. I can't believe that I got that bad luck. I guess it's nice so that I can demonstrate it in this video for all of you, but it was so frustrating when it happened. Alright, so let's rank these 2 in the tier list. Both of them today earn C tier placements. Machoke is currently positioned behind Farfetch'd and Poliwrath ahead of Jinx and Pinsir. By the way, Poliwrath is going to be so much better when I play it again. I'm sure that it's going to get into the S tier. So while these 2 fighting types are right beside each other right now, that's not always going to be the case. Graveler is the winner of today's video. It outperformed Machoke, and its results today earn it a placement at the top of the C tier, just behind Ghastly and ahead of Kangaskhan's current playthrough result. Although when I come back to run Kangaskhan again, it will perform better. It's an outrageously good solo running Pokemon. Let's switch over now and view all of the middle evolutions. As I predicted early on, Graveler and Machoke are just kind of middle of the pack here. They were able to outperform Kadabra, but that's because Kadabra starts out with no attacking moves. It only has Kinesis and Teleport, and then it has to train to level 16 using Struggle to beat Brock with Confusion. The fact that Graveler, Charmeleon, and Machoke all have similar results is actually kind of interesting. Charmeleon and Machoke feel very similar. They play extremely well and quickly in the early game, and then by the time they reach the water types later into the game, they start to suffer. Unlike these two, Graveler has a slower early game, which is very similar to the 2 grass types right in front of it, Ivysaur and Weepinbell. But unlike them, it doesn't get Swords Dance or Sleep Powder, so then it has to muscle its way through the later stages of the game. And the only way to do that in a time-conscious way was with some risk. Still, it's not as risky as playing the consistent strategy, because in the end, when all is said and done, the risky strategy outperformed on average. If you support me on Patreon or through YouTube memberships, thank you so much, it means the world to me. Now, if you've made it this far, you're incredible. I'll see you in my next video.